So there might be a real shakeup in the Chiefs wide receiver room, with a coach weighing in today about a guy in particular that he really wants on the roster, even though so far it appeared he was on the outside looking in. That might mean unexpected changes could happen come cutdown day. So I've got to talk about that, along with the Chiefs' biggest concern by far with the season right around the corner. But first, how about those? All right, first up, several assistant coaches spoke to the media today, and there's a lot to take away here. For starters, special teams coordinator and assistant head coach, some people forget that part of his title, but it'll come into play come cutdown day, spoke to the media today and shared about the wide receiver room that they have and the battle going on. There's a lot of guys there, with conversations still being had of how many there are going to be on the roster. They are all returners as well, at least all the guys in contention to make the 53, and that's where it comes into play a bit here for Tobe. Sky Moore is a guy who had a couple of solid kick returns in last week's preseason game, and Tobe thought he did a nice job in the kick returns. He hit it up in there and had a lot of desire to make a play. That's what you are looking for in a kick returner. Tobe also wanted to have him return a punt as well, but he just didn't get the opportunity because by the time he was ready for him on a punt return, he was already pulled from the game on offense. However, even though Sky had two solid kick returns, I found it interesting that when Tobe was asked about players he's considering or that are primary returners for the team right now, Sky wasn't actually mentioned.
Well, I don't know. Could be McCole. Nikko did a great job. I'll be pounding the table for that guy. I love him. Steele, he looks good back there. He hits it north and south. He'd be able to block. He's a guy that you could use a backup running back. Somewhere, maybe Prince. You need bigger guys that can block too.
I mean, honestly, Tobe didn't seem too confident on who his two kick returners are going to be just yet, but there's plenty to take away from his answer here. He mentioned McCole Hardman first, and Hardman is definitely an option because he could also make the roster and be the starting punt returner. That's not to mention how he could potentially fill in for Hollywood in some capacity and be used in other niche ways on the offense. But honestly, Tobe sounded way more excited about Nico Remigio. He said Nikko did a great job, and quote, "I'll be pounding the table for that guy. I love him." I mean, that's some pretty high praise for Remigio. He did have the best punt return of the evening against the Lions, a definite positive. So I guess the question is, when you look at the wide receiver room right now, is Nikko able to contribute enough on offense, like if push comes to shove and he's needed out there, in order for Andy Reid to justify him making it over somebody like McCole Hardman or maybe even Sky Moore? I'll share more of my thoughts on that here in a bit, but first, Tobe mentioned a couple of other returner options for the team, with those being Carson Steele and Deneric Prince. Steele could make sense considering he's a guy that's fighting to make the running back room, a guy who is most likely going to make the running back room. I would consider him a lock at this point in time, and Tobe seems to like the idea of having at least one of his two returners back there being a bigger-bodied guy. He didn't seem like he wants two smaller-bodied, quicker punt returner style guys, so maybe one like McCole or Nikko, then the other one out there is a bigger guy like Steele or Deneric Prince. Nagy shared a bit about both of these guys, both of these running backs today. With Steele, he had a big run in the first game, and they saw some of those flashes in training camp. He's a guy that's in meetings early, doing all he can to learn the offense, and just needs to continue to show he can do what's needed for KC at the running back position, from pass pro to taking handoffs and catching out of the backfield. Then Deneric Prince is a tough running back. He's quiet, doesn't say much, but puts his head down and works. He makes mistakes here and there, sure, but he loved that big run he had down the sideline of his last week's game, and his hard work is paying off. Another running back mentioned by both Tobe and Nagy is Louis Rees-Zammit. LRZ can absolutely do the kickoffs. There's no question about it, said Dave Tobe. He can also be a cover guy on returns, and that is definitely where LRZ needs to shine brightest in order to earn a spot on the roster. Special teams, because that's only half the battle, and Matt Nagy seemed a bit less optimistic about him at this point in time. On the offense, he shared that LRZ needs more developing, even though, yes, he's improving every day, has a great attitude, and has come a long way considering he completely switched sports in order to be here. Lewis will see plenty of reps and opportunities this Thursday, but there needs to be a little bit of patience with him. And that's why, as of right now, I'm really not sure how LRZ makes the 53-man roster, because both Deneric Prince and Carson Steele can contribute on special teams as well as the offense. Sure, they can't kick, but I don't know if that's enough to justify LRZ making the roster at this point in time. Hopefully, KC is able to stash him on the practice squad for a year, and he can flourish or have a much better opportunity next season after he's had more time. Then to stay on the running back room here, CEH has missed a lot of time due to illness, and Matt Nagy said, quote, "We'll see where coach is at," when asked if Clyde is going to play in Thursday's game or not because of all the time he's missed. Nagy did say they know who he is, what his strengths are, and how to use him, so he didn't seem overly concerned about the time Clyde has missed and didn't make it seem like CEH needed a ton of reps in this last preseason game. He's a veteran in the room, and his teams listen to him, and with everything going on with him health-wise, Nagy hopes that Clyde knows he and his teammates have his back. And I still think Clyde's status is pretty up in the air as far as what the heck to do with this guy making the 53-man roster. He's going to be one to watch, depending on how his health is doing. And Andy Reid said basically in his presser the other day, this is uncharted territory, and they all are kind of rolling with it as they move along and learning all along the way. Now, another guy to watch out there is the veteran wideout, Mecole Hardman. He's kind of like Clyde, 5 or so years in the NFL, and they are both here on vet minimum deals. Mecole hasn't gotten a chance to return a kickoff yet in a game, and while he's still on the fence about it, like just the rule changes in general, he did say these changes can potentially lead to some exciting returns. Mecole thinks that Rashee Rice has progressed very well. He's a leader in the room and the main guy. He's taken that very well. Meanwhile, Xavier is bringing the speed and will go through a learning curve as a rookie, as all rookies do when the season starts, but he's doing a great job. For Mecole, things are different for him this year on the team. The wide receiver room is pretty established, so he's just here to carve out a role as he's able, make the most of his opportunities that he's given, and just go from there. Quote, "Whatever happens, happens." He does know the system and feels like he can contribute, especially as one of the guys with speed on the offense. However, this is a time where nerves can kind of start creeping in for players with cut-down day right around the corner, and that goes for himself this year also. Quote, "You never know what can happen. They've all just got to make the most of every opportunity given this last preseason game." And yeah, this is very true. I've had Mecole making the roster as that wide receiver 5 or 6 after Justin Watson and maybe Sky Moore because of what he can bring as a returner for kickoffs, punts, and you know what you get with him on the offense. But he's on a vet min deal. There's very little financial repercussions to move on from him, and as a vested veteran with over 4 years in the league, he wouldn't have to clear waivers if released from the team on cutdown day, and maybe the Chiefs could convince him to sign with the practice squad. I think he would have demand from other teams, but you never know. I think the biggest question is still what I mentioned earlier in this video. Will Dave Toub make enough of a case to keep Nikko Remigio on this roster over somebody like Mecole? The answer is possibly yes. Dave Toub could really put up a fight there. I just think Andy would like to see a bit more from Nikko on offense in order to justify it. So this is an important game for them both come Thursday against Chicago. Both Nagy and Toub made it clear that the goal for Thursday is to put guys in the right spots in order to see them get the most or the best opportunities to make plays. They got to play fast as they evaluate these guys, and that's one of the most important things. How fast can these guys play while making as few mistakes as possible? There's a few key guys they will be watching in this game. They're not going to specify for confidentiality reasons, but they're going to be watching each rep they take and how they perform on special teams as well, because any depth guy on the bubble has to contribute both on offense as well as teams in some capacity. And before I get to what I think might be the most concerning aspect of this roster, I did want to point out that Dave Toub was 0% concerned about the team's veteran long snapper James Winchester playing in the season opener against Baltimore. He has a AC sprain that he sustained in the last preseason game, got a shot in his shoulder at halftime and finished the game. And if this Thursday was a regular season game, Toub said he could do the same this week as well. So get a shot in the shoulder and play. However, since it's a preseason game, they're going to have him rest, and that's why they signed the former K-State long snapper, Randon Plattner, and he's going to give it a go this week. And then they'll see what he can do with Winchester out. The last thing I'll mention here about special teams is something I found pretty interesting that Dave Toub said. He mentioned so far this preseason, the average kick return is getting up to the 28 or 29 yard line, and with a touchback now placing the ball at the 30, teams may yet again just opt to kick a touchback on the majority of kickoffs in the regular season rather than risk giving up a huge return. So we shall see, but all these kickoff rule changes could amount to very little returns once again this year. Next up, we've got to chat defense here because defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo shared a few concerning things about the defensive side of the ball. For starters, the cornerback battle has been pretty frustrating for him because of the injuries that have piled up in the room at various times in the lead up to the season. It's like nobody can stay healthy, or at least not everybody can stay healthy at the same time, so they can really evaluate what they have. That's prevented them from getting a full picture of the room. And honestly, that's been the concern for him with the defense as a whole.
We couldn't have, because Jay Reed hasn't had any practice snaps, right? So I don't believe we've had, let's call it our top 11, 12, or 13, whatever that is, right? I don't think we've had them on the field for one play. That's concerning.
Well, that's definitely less than ideal. And while Spags said those things are out of their control, they can't help who gets injured, and all they can do really is play the best next man up and work on their overall conditioning. And speaking of injuries, we do have yet another cornerback who did not practice today, with that being Joshua Williams due to a hamstring tweak of sorts. At this point in time, no idea how severe it is. The only thing we have to go on was Matt McMullen, the team's senior reporter, tweeting this out. Catching up on some injury updates, Joshua Williams' hamstring didn't practice today for the Chiefs. So hopefully it's precautionary more than anything, because while Jalen Watson should be playing in this game due to missing out on OTAs and most of training camp with the shoulder rehab, Joshua Williams should be one that was slated to get some rest. Most of the starters are not playing this Thursday, so hopefully that gives Williams enough time to heal up before the season opener. Anyway, with that, Spags continued sharing his concern about the cornerback room, saying these injuries are making things difficult to decide on which way to go for CB2. They can't yet say there's a starting other corner at this point in time. Then, when asked if there's an option to bring a veteran cornerback into the room, he said Veach and Andy may have their eyes on someone. They are always looking around, and shared this could be a conversation they have in the next couple of days with cutdowns right around the corner. I mean, hopefully Jalen Watson steps up enough to be that guy, because with Stephon Gilmore now off the table, there's not a ton of free agent options left out there, unless maybe somebody gets cut from a team's 90 when they get down to 53. Spags then mentioned that even the defensive backs out there who have made plays and stood out a bit in the preseason, one thing that's been tough is Detroit didn't even play any of their starters. So when they see players make something happen, they have to also consider the fact that they did this against a backup rather than a starter, which makes it even more difficult to evaluate at times. Ultimately, they're going to need to go with their gut, a gut feeling at the end of the day. Another thing Spags seems a bit concerned about is the fact that the chemistry guys have been the ones out on defense, and that's cornerback room aside. You've got some big heavy hitters that have been missing time. Chris Jones along the defensive line. Nick Bolton, who runs the show at Mike linebacker. Brian Cook was out a week or so as he was awaiting the birth of his child. Justin Reed is another one who missed all of training camp. So all these guys kind of run the defense, so to speak, and they're going to have to attempt to really build back the familiarity and chemistry over the next 2 weeks before the start of the regular season. And with all that being said, does Spags' honesty here give you any cause for concern with the defense having all these key players missing time at one point or another in camp or preseason, and also not having the entire starting unit out there together for any time of camp or preseason? Then there's still the whole, they have no idea at this point in time who the second cornerback is going to be out there opposite Trent McDuffie. So give me your concern level on a scale of 1 to 10, your thoughts on all of that in the comments down below. Mine, for the record, is at like a 4.5 for the defense. Not horrible, but there is some concern. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?